you join us. We know that you care about the Lord's church. We know that you care about winning souls, and that we're here to learn how to do this and how to do it better. And we need to constantly devote ourselves to learning how to do the Lord's work better. It's like continuing education in the workplace. We need to do our continuing education in the church place. All right. Just one announcement. If you are coming tomorrow night, you're welcome to be with us at 5:45 for supper. We're going to have sandwich supper. And then on Thursday at 5:45, we're going to have another supper, but I think it's going to be soups and chili. And so you're welcome to join us there, too, in the multipurpose room, 5:45, if you can make it here that early. And then I think getting my mind's wrapped around the idea that it starts at 6:30, that's the other thing. I think in my brain I'm still programmed for 7. But anyway, I wanted to just make that announcement, and then I want to make a statement of introduction about Rob and his family. Rob was born in Illinois, but he moved to San Antonio, Texas as fast as his family could. He was actually raised there. In fact, when I met him back in 1997, that's where they were from. And maybe I met him before that at some Shenandoah lectureships, but it's been a long time ago. But he's a 1997 graduate of the Southwest School of Bible Studies. He went to their continuing education course and got a certificate in sacred history. And he has a BA degree from the Southern Christian University. And so he really got to start preaching full-time in 97 and currently serves as an evangelist for House to House, Heart to Heart in Jacksonville, Alabama. Back to his first work, he was in Poole, Kentucky. And I remember Poole, Kentucky, because Joseph Metter was the director of the School of Preaching back in those days, and that was his first work, and he was always talking about Poole, Kentucky. So Poole, Kentucky got drilled in my head for a very long time, and so I always knew about that. But he's in Jacksonville, Alabama now, and his wife is big into this too. She is a graduate of Freed-Hardeman University, studied elementary education. She homeschools her children. She's a Bible class teacher. She teaches personal evangelism here in the States and abroad, dozens of congregations here in the United States, and works full-time with her husband. And I asked Rob, I said, what can I say? I want some other bullet points about you because I thought it was cool that he's a private pilot too. But you know what he said? He said, you can abbreviate it. No need to say too much. Just introduce my family. They're the most important asset that I have. Now, there's a man worth listening to right there. I'll just say a little word about Hannah and Jared, his daughter and son. Hannah works for House to House, Heart to Heart School of Evangelism and Back to the Bible. She's finished 2 years of college and enjoys reading and loves to travel. Jared is in high school and is homeschooled. He plays soccer and owns his own lawn care business. And he works part-time for Back to the Bible. And you should have seen him up here last night setting up those tables and everything out there in front. They really worked hard. And now I present to you our dear brother and teacher for this seminar, Brother Rob Whitacre.
Tonight, where Mexican food is Tex-Mex, and tortillas don't have a half-life, and barbecue is beef, and ice cream is Bluebell. And when we left Texas, I left eating. I can tell you, I mean, you just lose weight when you leave Texas, and it's great to be back. I love Texas. This is my home, and just thank God to have an opportunity to travel and to visit my brethren in the Lone Star State. And you're visiting tonight, whether you're from Oklahoma or from Texas or Arkansas. I know some of you have traveled a little distance to be here, and we just thank God for the opportunity to focus our minds on the most important mission in life, and that is evangelism. I want to remind you tonight that in your hand is some material. That material is being provided by the Lord's church, and I wish my family could provide it. We just can't, but the Lord's church is providing that material tonight, and you should have in your hands the Evangelism Simplified Guidebook. This is important, and this is going to be a tool to help you learn how to reach out. And at the end of that booklet, I want you right now to open it up because I'm already going to get started. This is a practical evangelistic boot camp. You have been enrolled in a this is not a gospel meeting. This is an evangelistic boot camp. You are now enrolled in the House to House, Heart to Heart School of Evangelism. So look in the back of that. There's a note section, and write this website down. Don't church. Now, we don't mind if somebody else looks at it, but this is a training material for soul winning. That is a resource. So go ahead and evangelism.housetohouse.com, and we want to make sure that you have that written down. Now, I'm going to pass around a couple of clipboards, and I'm going to ask that you sign it. Put your name, put your mailing address on that clipboard, and here's why you want to do that. You're enrolled. And as a student in evangelism, I'm going to send you material. I'm going to send you training material. I'm going to send you reports on baptisms. I'm going to give you information about churches where we visited. This is our 8th church already this year. We've already trained 8 churches. And as we go from church to church, we want reports. And I don't want to tell you about what I'm doing. I want to hear about what you're doing. So you're going to hear a report from BCS next week. You're going to hear a report. Guess what? From Mount Pleasant next week. That's right. Next week, I expect my first report. Before Wednesday hits, Wednesday morning, I'm already going to ask Chris for your first report. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. Every church I visit, we catalog, and we have a process we walk through. This is an A to Z evangelism training strategy. This is going to be something that's going to, I hope, be culturally significant in the history of this church. Not doctrinally significant. We don't need to change our doctrine. The doctrine of Jesus Christ is 2,000 years old. It's as solid as the cross. But there has to be some changing of culture in our churches where we refocus on the mission of the gospel. And this is what this, I hope, will become for Mount Pleasant. Recently, was at a church in Tuscaloosa with Clark Sims. He said, I want this to be a game changer for this church. Well, I like that language. I hope and pray this will be a game changer for you. You look back and say, this day forward, we were not the same. We took this mission and we went out to our communities, and as soldiers in the army of Christ, we engaged the enemy. And when we engage the enemy, I can tell you for sure, Jesus Christ will be the winner. He'll be the victor every time. And I cannot wait to see what happens here at Mount Pleasant. You got a solid family in your pulpit. I've already met some of your elders. I've enjoyed speaking with them, your deacons. And I think this is going to be a game-changing week for all of you. Let me go ahead and pass this around on this side. And Brother Jeff, you can make sure this gets around to everybody. And there's another clipboard. Please put your name, your address, and your email address. So I like to take care of some house cleaning items before we start. This is called Back to the Bible. And make sure you have that. If you're missing Back to the Bible or the Evangelism Simplified Guidebook, just raise your hand. And we will make sure you're provided that free of charge. Again, paid for by Christians, members of the church, churches of Christ. They're providing that for you. These are materials that you'll need to be successful. And so you won't leave here without them. Bring them back each session, 2 sessions a night. And I hope that you'll find them helpful. And we'll tell you a little bit about what they can provide you as individual Christians. Now, the School of Evangelism is a traveling school. We're not a brick and mortar school. You're the brick and mortar. So we come to you. Now, last year, my family went to 32 churches of Christ. We traveled from New Hampshire to Idaho, from Texas to Florida, and we just train churches. That's what we do. And my home is the Holiday Inn Express. We just go from church to church. We train churches how to be soul winners, and then we call back and say, where are you in the process? Because I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you. I'm going to say, what's going on since we left? This is transformational. That we can't go back to the status quo, and I believe you'll understand why here just momentarily. The Bible says the fruit of the righteous is the tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise. I want to stop and say this. I love elders. My father is an elder. My father will be here, I believe, on Wednesday, and he travels with us some. He helps some of these churches, and my grandfather was an elder. I've got an uncle who's a preacher. I've got a cousin who's a preacher. I've got another uncle who's a deacon. I love the Church of Christ, and I want to commend your eldership. Your eldership did not have to do this, but I'll say this very clearly tonight, that there is not a more important mission that you could be embarking on than soul winning. It is the wisest thing you can do. If you want to change course, you want to see growth in the church, this is the answer. This is what churches need to do. They need to do it right now. Time is wasting. Let me go ahead and introduce to you the strategy that we're going to employ this week. So number one, this is my first job. It's a difficult job. This is the most difficult job I'm going to have these 3 days. I've got to convince you that evangelism works in America. Most of you don't believe it works. Most of you believe it works in India. You believe it works in Africa. It does not work here. We're beyond saving. We're materialistic. We don't have time. And we'd be better sending our missionaries somewhere else. And so you have given up in this country, and it's very evident. It's very evident. What I see in my brethren as I travel across this country, what I see in their eyes is losing. I see discouragement. What I see in the eyes of my brethren are those who've been trying for years to evangelize. They've not been successful, and a lot of us have given up. And I've got to change that in lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, let's stay with the Bible. Let's stick with the message. We don't have to change the Bible. We don't have to change the message in order for us to be successful soul winners. In fact, to the contrary, in order to be successful, we got to look in this book and find out what we need to do. Because there's a strategy of success in this book. Number 3, how do you get into a Bible study? So the Bible study is important, but if you can't get into one, it won't do you any good. You can memorize back to the Bible, but if you don't know how to get yourself into the study, that back to the Bible is going to sit on that countertop, and it's not going to produce one Bible study and one baptism. Then we're going to introduce back to the Bible. I'm going to teach you how to use it. It won't take me but a few minutes. It is the simplest Bible study method that I know. I've got a lot of them in my library. I don't know one that's simpler than this. Then we're going to make it apply to the real world, because people have problems. We're not dot to dots. And so therefore there are issues that are going to come up in a study that scare a lot of people. And how do you deal with it? I mean, how do you get it? How do you deal with those problems? We're going to apply it to the real world. I'm going to show you that there's nothing Satan can put in your path that will keep you from being successful at teaching someone the gospel. Then the most important part of this entire seminar is when we divide our men and women into 2 groups. My wife is going to take your ladies, I'm going to take the men, and we're going to give you the 10-point plan, or the 10 ingredients for evangelism. We're going to give you the practical part. The first 5 lessons are principle. You got to know the principles before we do the practice. So you're going to go to school for 5 lessons. Lesson number 6, I'm going to put the hammer in your hand, and we're going to drive a nail. I've got 10 of them to drive with you, and we're going to build. We're going to frame it up and build it. And it's the funnest of all the lessons, because it puts you to work. It puts the labor on the back of every member. I don't care who you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care if you're older, you're younger, elder, deacon, church member, new Christian, older Christian. Every person is going to be put to work. And if we do it, we'll be successful. I can't wait to share with you some of the success that's going on right now. I can say this. In the last couple months, I've seen more passion and more energy from church members than I've seen in my life. What I'm seeing right now in the last few months is so exciting to a preacher. And I hope it continues here. It's infectious. I'm going to share with you what's going on in some of these churches. This is number 8. I got number 9. We leave Thursday night, and we're heading down to Graber Road in Rosenberg, Texas, with Andy Baker. And we're just going to keep training. And I believe you're going to find the same success here that other churches are also experiencing. So let's go ahead and get started with lesson number 1. In the year 2000, we had 13,155 churches of Christ in this country. In the year 2009, we had 12,629 churches of Christ. In the year 2015, we had 12,300 churches of Christ. In 2018, we had 11,965 churches of Christ. I don't know if you can see the pattern, but brother, we're declining. Each year, we're losing churches of Christ. Now, one brother came up to me after I gave these numbers. He looked at me and said, "Preacher, no need to get excited about those numbers. We're not declining. We're just consolidating. You know, the rural congregations, we don't need a church on every street corner. We're just kind of consolidating together." And so I said, "Brother, if that's right, you explain this to me." In the year 2000, we had 1,265,000 church members in this country. In the year 2009, we had 1,224,000 church members. In 2015, we had 1,180,000 church members. 2018, 1,128,000 church members. I don't care how you parse those numbers, brethren, we're losing. We are losing members every single year. And do you know what's scary about those numbers? Those were pre-COVID numbers. That's before COVID took about half the church. And our attendance right now in the average church is down 50%. If you're above the 50% mark, brethren, you do well. Because most churches I visit, we're at the 50% level. Right now, we're facing we're hemorrhaging church members like we've never hemorrhaged before. In many places, the Church of Christ has gone morbid. She has almost completely shut down. We're at a critical juncture in the history of the Church of Christ at this very day. I want to put this into historical perspective. We go back to 1906, census, United States of America, 85 million people. Members of the Church of Christ estimated, gospel advocate, 159,658. That's a ratio of one Christian to every 535 people. Now, let me put that into layman's terms. That means if you walk across the farm fields, you're going to come across 535 people before you come to a member of the Church of Christ. Pretty sparse, isn't it? Watch this. 1946, population of the country, 141 million. Look at the members of the Church of Christ, 682,000. Now the ratio has been cut in half. One Christian for every 207 people. 1953, 160 million people in this country. Members of the Lord's church, 1.5 million. Now the ratio is 1 to 106. 1967, 1 to 84. 1973, there are 2.5 million members of the Lord's church. Brethren, I want you to look at these numbers very carefully. We grew during the Great Depression. We grew during World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, civil rights. We grew during the feminist movement. Every major challenge this nation faced, the Church of Christ grew. Friends, no wonder God blessed America. The Bible says righteousness exalts a nation and sin is a reproach to any people. There's no doubt in my mind the reason America became the greatest nation on earth is because the people in this country were the greatest people on earth. Righteousness takes a nation out of the doldrum of sin. Righteousness is what makes a nation the most powerful nation in the world. Friends, we've been trying to fight spiritual battles through physical means for far too long. The way we help our country is to wrestle not against flesh and blood, not in the ballot box, not with the presidency and the Congress. The answers to what ails our country sit in the pews of the churches of Christ. Brethren, we are the soldiers in the army of Christ, and we must engage the soldiers in this war against sin and against the darkness of sin, and we must understand that that is the answer. We are the answer to what this country needs. We need more Christians in America, and if we can do that, we'll turn this country around. We'll get the right leaders in there because Christians are going to do what's right. But do you know what happened in 1975? Things started to turn around, and they turned around drastically. And friends, I want you to notice these numbers because we have done nothing but decline for the past 4 decades. We have been in a trajectory of decline for 4 decades, 2 generations. The Church of Christ has been losing numbers over and over again. Brethren, we're losing. Right now, the Lord's church is in a critical stage. We have lost church members to a point right now that if you project it out, and I'm just going to give it to you, you project this out, go to 2069, everybody fast forward 2069, we're going to call India, and we're going to say, can you send your missionaries to America? Because we're not here anymore. There's not a Church of Christ left. Our grandchildren won't have a Church of Christ. Brethren, we are losing church members so quickly right now. The Lord's church is on the brink. We stand at the forefront of a battle for the salvation or the saving of the Church of Christ in our country. The church will not go extinct. But I tell you what, she can be diminished to a point in this nation where she goes back to seed form. And I don't want to see that happen. Not on my watch. But not when there's something we can do about it. Not when we've got the answer. Not when we still have a million soldiers in the army of Christ. We have church buildings and we have resources and we have soldiers. And all we've got to do is engage the enemy. We've got to refocus. We've got to do what we once were great at. We were the best at it. No one was better. There was nobody in America, in any religion, better than the Church of Christ at what we do. Brethren, we are an evangelistic body. That's how God made us. And we have lost our way. We have lost our way, and we got to go back. We got to go right back to a time where we were the evangelistic-centered body that went across this country, and we knocked doors, and we did Bible studies, and we showed Jewel Miller film strips. We don't have to get the film strip canister out, but we've got to get back to a time where we engaged the community. Instead, too many churches have put evangelism on the back of their preacher, and they try to hire the preacher to do all their evangelism for them, And that's an outright failure. Doesn't work. I don't care how good Chris is, and I know Chris is a good man. I don't care how talented your preacher is. I don't care how many you hire. They can't do it for you. Not until the whole church gets engaged. Not until every single member of the Church of Christ realizes their mission, the most important mission in your life, is to save souls, will we be successful again. Why am I here tonight? I'm here tonight because I want to make a difference. My family was in full-time ministry for 22 plus years. My last work was the Willette Church of Christ. We took a church from 220, 230, and we lived in the middle of nowhere. 240, there's a Walmart, you go an hour. We're at 260, 270, 280. No one moves to Willette. Everybody moves away. And the reason we grew was because we evangelized. In fact, we've done it in every work. Where we were at Poole, Hillsboro, or Willette, my family dedicated the local church. Here's our mission. We're going to evangelize. I've taken those experiences, and I've been asked. I didn't want to do this. I want you to realize I didn't ask to do this. I was asked by brethren, please train churches how to do what you're doing. I want to share with you why I'm here. There are some things that have happened in my family's life that really, they transformed us. They taught us some things. They opened our eyes. And it began with the phone call. And his name was Chris Coyle. I was sitting on my desk, and the phone rang. I said, hello. He said, hey, is this the preacher at Willette? I said, yes, sir. Name's Rob Whitacre. He says, my name's Chris Coyle. You don't know me. He said, I'm a preacher at Somerville, Church of Christ, Somerville, Tennessee, near Freed-Hardeman University. He said, I need you to do a Bible study. I said, oh, you hit the right person. I love Bible studies. I said, who am I going to study with? He says, you're going to study with Jackie and Sheila Birdwell. He says, I said, great. I said, this is wonderful. I said, what day do I need to study? He said, well, we haven't selected the day yet. I said, that's all right. I said, any day or night, I don't care when it is. I'll be available. I said, hey, Chris, I said, when did they request the Bible study? He said, oh, well, they haven't. I said, okay, Chris, how am I supposed to go study with two people who've never requested a Bible study? He says, I don't know. That's your problem now. And I said, why am I going to study with Jackie and Sheila Bird? Well, he says, well, we've got this member. Her name is Scarlett, and she met her husband. They did Bible studies together. She was baptized. She came to me. She's a new Christian. And she said, would you please find somebody to go teach my parents? I said, so they don't know I'm coming. They have no idea we're having this conversation. I said, all right. Well, we got off the phone that night, and I looked at that piece of paper. I had Jackie and Sheila Birdwell on it, and I said, that is the craziest phone call I've ever received. And I crunkled that piece of paper up, and I put it in the wastebasket. And I got back to the important things, like doing a church bulletin and folding the bulletins. Preachers have to fold bulletins. And I made sure I had the prayer list filled out. And so I went back to that, and I went out to my truck that Saturday night. I had the bulletins out for Sunday morning. I felt like I'd done my job. And I started up my truck. Rob Whitacre, what in the world are you doing? You get back in that office. You don't throw souls away. So I went back to my office. I pulled that piece of paper out. I put it on my desk, and I went home. I didn't sleep well that night. All I could think about was Jackie and Sheila Birdwell. I said, what am I going to do with Jackie and Sheila Birdwell? I didn't know. And that next Monday, I got to my desk, and you know what was on my desk? The piece of paper that said Jackie and Sheila Birdwell, and I had no idea what to do with it. I've been preaching the gospel for 15 years, and I had no idea how to reach someone in my own community. I sat there, and I scratched my head, and I said, well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray about it. It's never wrong to pray. So I bowed, and I prayed for God. I prayed for wisdom. I prayed for doors of utterance, because Paul prayed that prayer. I prayed that I would have a wisdom in how I approach this. And when I got done with that prayer, I said, prayer's not going to help you, preacher, if you don't do something. So I decided to embark on a study I'd never done before. And I studied Jesus in a lot of different categories. I studied him as the creator of the world. You did that when you were in Bible class when you were a little girl. I studied Jesus as the head of the church. You did that in middle school class when you were in Bible school, the head of the church. I studied Jesus as my Savior, and that's what I did when I was baptized. But I'd never studied Jesus as an evangelist. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know why Jesus was so good. I didn't know what Jesus did. So I decided to undergo a study, and I learned some things during that study. Here's what I learned. I learned that Jesus did things that I didn't do. And the things that I did that I thought made me successful, he didn't do. And I began to make notes and write down. I'm formulating a strategy to how I can get to Jackie and Sheila. And one day I'm sitting in my office, and Jonathan Smith comes home. And he sits in my office. Jonathan's just graduated from UT. That's the University of Tennessee. And he's in my office, and he's talking about, hey, he's met this young lady, Elizabeth Smith, and met him at Carnes, and they're getting married. She's a member of the church. And hey, Rob, he said, I got to go. Man, it's getting late. He said, I'm supposed to go see my best friend. I said, well, who is he? Evan Birdwell. Evan. I said, Jonathan, is Evan Birdwell related to Jackie and Sheila Birdwell? He said, oh, yeah, that's like my second parents. He's their son. And I said, man, that's great. Take me with you. He said, take you with me? I said, yes, sir, take. He said, why would you want it? I said, I explained the whole thing. I said, you have one rule. Don't call me your preacher. I said, just say I'm your friend. He got to the door, and he knocked on it, and Sheila opened the door. Jonathan! I mean, she grabbed him and hugged him, and she said, Jackie, get over here. Jonathan's home from college. And I mean, it was just, the welcome you want to receive. Who you got with you, Jonathan? Oh, just a friend of mine. Well, any friend of Jonathan's a friend of mine. Come on in. And we had, like any good Southern woman, chocolate chip cookies and sweet tea. We sat around the table, and we visited 10, 15, 20 minutes until the awkward moment happened. Who'd you say you were again? I said, oh, yes, sir. I said, yes, ma'am. Well, let me introduce myself. My name's Rob Whitacre. I'm the preacher for the Willette Church of Christ, and you've got questions for me. I sure do. And, man, she lit them rip. I mean, they just rolled off her tongue. And it's like she had rehearsed them. And, but I've learned something. And I'm not going to make the same mistakes I've made in the past. I will not answer. I don't care what she asks, I'm not answering. I deferred every question. I just rolled it forward. She didn't know what I was doing. In fact, she sat there for 10, 15 minutes, and I'm just rolling every question right around back to her, and she doesn't see it. It took her a little while. Finally, after maybe 15, 20 minutes, she looks over at Jackie, and she says, Jackie, why won't that man answer my questions? And I said, that's a good observation, Sheila. I said, I tell you what, I'm a terrible teller, but I can show you. Show me? I said, yeah, open the Bible. You mean a Bible study? I said, I didn't call it that. I said, whatever you want to call it. I said, but I'll show you in the Bible. Jackie, can we do a Bible study with the preacher for the Church of Christ? And Jackie looked over at his wife. He said, I don't think it's ever wrong to study the Bible. And I said, well, she says, now, preacher, she says, I'll do this study with you, but no one can know. It must be a secret study. I said, a secret study. I said, okay. She said, if they find out, they'll excommunicate us. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I got an alternate plan here. I said, why didn't you let me tell just a couple of my elders? She said, well, why do you want to do that? So we can pray. I think we need to pray when we have a Bible. Somebody needs to pray for it. She said, well, who are these elders? I said, well, Hugh Wayne Clark, Joel. Well, I know those men. She said, you can tell those men. I said, okay. She says, I grew up with their kids. We grew up together. I said, all right. Well, I got home that night, and I was so excited. I looked at Hannah, Nicole, and Jared, and I told them, I said, this is exactly, man, this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. I got up in the pulpit, and I'm doing things different. I'm going to talk about evangelism from the pulpit every time I get up there. I'm going to talk about Bible studies. I'm going to talk about lost souls, but I can't name them. I said, brethren, we've got an opportunity. I've got this study, and I need you to pray about it. Pray for your preacher. Pray for Jonathan. Pray that this goes well. I mean, we were praying about it. We showed up on that Monday to do our first study. I had the green booklet. You got it, lesson number 1. And I walked into their home. We sat around the table. I said, now I've got these booklets. It's back to the Bible. Here it is, green booklet. I said, now let's look at John. Hey, now you just wait 1 minute, preacher. She says, I need to tell you about my religious experience. And I said, okay. I said, let me get my pen out. And I got my piece of paper. I was ready for this. And she started her story. She said, now one night, Rob, it was late, and the lightning was striking, and the rain was falling, and it was I could hardly see. And she said, and all of a sudden, snap, the tree caught on fire. And then it went over the road. The Holy Spirit took over and she took my. You don't believe me, do you? And I said, well, I said, Sheila, I said, if that's what you said happened, I don't know why I wouldn't. I'm writing it all down. She says, and the Holy Spirit took over and swerved me out of the way, and I went down into the ditch, and at that moment I had the religious experience, and the hairs came up out of my back. I just felt like, and I went to the church the next week, and I testified, and they said I was saved. And she said, a month later we had the baptism. She said, I thought you need to know that. I said, well, Sheila, I'm glad you shared it with me. I said, I love religious people. And it's obvious that you feel very close to your Lord. She says, I sure do. I said, I'm thankful you shared it. I said, would it be okay if we read John 8:32? And she said, well, yes. I said, well, let's turn our Bibles. And she read John 8:32. Jesus said, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And I said, what makes you free, Sheila? She says, the truth. I said, can you write it down? She says, I can. Jackie, would you read John 17:17? Sanctify them through thy word is truth. I said, what is truth, Jackie? He says, the word of God. I said, write that in the blank for me, if you will. And we started our study. When it was an incredible night. They knew the books of the Bible. They found the passages. They're writing it in the blank. When we finished that study, Jackie said, Rob, he said, man, I learned more about the Bible tonight, and I've learned in a long time. And man, I didn't know about that Old New Testament difference. He said, that was really, he said, there are some things you need to know about Sheila and I, by the way. I said, well, say on. He said, well, I'm a deacon. I'm a deacon of the local missionary Baptist church. And I said, well, Jackie, I said, it's obvious you're committed. I said, that's a good thing to be committed. And he said, yes. And he says, I'm also their treasurer, and I'm their Bible class teacher. And I said, well, man, I love people who like to study the Bible. And he said, and she said, now I started the Bible class department, Rob, when my children were little. They had no Bible classes there. And I said, Sheila, I said, you guys are jewels. And he said, Rob, he said, I noticed something tonight. When we were doing this study, you ever skip verses? Like you ever come across verses he says, sometimes I come across these verses and either we don't do it or I don't understand it. Come across verses like that you're just not sure your church does. And I said, well, so Jackie, if I ever came across a verse that we didn't do, we'd change. He said, man, I enjoyed this tonight. I said, I do. I said, would y'all like to do a second one? He said, well, yeah, we'd like to know more about what you guys are doing. And so I said, okay, sounds really good. And so we came back the next week, and we did book 2. This is on the Church of Christ. We're going to talk about the worship of the church, the name of the church, the organization of the church, the headship of the church. I know what he's going to read are in a direct contradiction of what he believes. Do you know what he did? In fact, I even stopped one time and said, Jackie, you got any questions about this? He said, Rob, if it's in the Bible, I'll put it down. You got to respect a man like that. I mean, he said, if it's in the Bible, I'll write it. And they got every one of them right. We got to the end of the study. I said, Jackie and Sheila, I said, have you learned something? He said, I have learned so much. I said, I tell you what, why don't we do one more Bible study? I said, I think that's going to be the one that really sheds light on everything. He said, sounds good, Rob. And I said, okay. I get home and I tell the kids all about it. I said, Nicole, I've got a disadvantage here, and here it is. I don't know anything about missionary Baptists. I said, I don't know what they believe, and I got to find out. I got to call Scarlett. So I got Scarlett's number, and I called. I said, Miss Scarlett, I said, would you tell me why you became a Christian? And I tell you, she goes, are you Rob Whitacre? I said, yes, ma'am. You're the one teaching Mama? I said, yes, ma'am. Man, she kept me on the phone for an hour that night. She said, every study, she said, Mama calls me. And she said, do you think she's going to obey the God? I said, Scarlett, I don't know, but you could help me. You'll tell me why you did. She told me 2 things that I'll never forget. She said, Rob, when I told my parents about my decision, she said, now, Scarlett, you know that if you do this, we'll have to excommunicate you. And I said, excommunicate? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, she says, that means the deacons have to come. And they came. I said, what did the deacons do? They brought the briefcase. I said, the briefcase? And she said, yes, they brought it right in the house. I said, what was in the briefcase? She said, oh, it was the notebook. What notebook? Oh, the church roster. And I said, what did they do with the briefcase and the notebook and the church roster? They erased my name. I said, okay. I said, and after that we prayed. They prayed. And I said, then what happened? They left. And I said, that's all that happened. She said, Rob, I had my Bible in my hand. Do you know what I was going to do that night? I was going to show my parents why I did what I did. She said, I was ready. I said, did they even bring a Bible? Didn't say it. Had the spiral. I said, did they ask you any questions? She said, no. She said, my parents were livid. Jackie, you mean we've been members of this church all of our lives and they didn't even try to win her back? What's wrong? I don't understand. I said, man, I said, Scarlett, that's interesting. Now, she said something else that night that I'm going to share with you later. I went into that final study, and Jonathan and I were about to knock on the door, and I didn't know this. Jackie and Sheila had a secret meeting, private meeting. This is what they said. Jackie said, you know that preacher's coming, Sheila, tonight. It's the last study. You know what he's going to do. And we're not changing. He says, he thinks he's going to baptize us. He says, I'm not, he said, I've been a Baptist all these years. I'm a deacon. I'm going to die a Baptist. And Sheila says, shoo. She says, Jackie, I was wondering. She says, you know, I was born a Baptist. Mama's a Baptist. Grandmama's a Baptist. Aunt so-and-so plays to be. She says, and I'm going to die a Baptist. And Jackie says, well, I'm glad we've got that covered. And I walked in. Brother, it's amazing what happens when you read the Bible. This book has power you can't even begin to understand. You make this a competition between you and them, you lose. You put a person into this book, you let a person read the Word of God, you'll be amazed at what happened. And I knew that if Jackie was reading the Bible and Sheila were reading the Bible, and I knew what was going to happen when we got to baptism. I just let them read. I brought out a chart from that simplified book. It's actually in Back to the Bible. I drew it out for him. I showed him exactly every verse. He read it. You know what the problem we had that night was? He got it. His eyes started to water. His hands started to shake. He wouldn't look at me. I knew right there he had it. I said, Jackie, I said, are you okay? I said, Jackie, I said, I tell you what, I don't normally do this in a study, but I just had no choice. I said, Jackie, what are you going to do with what you've just read? He said, Rob, he says, I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. She knew what he was saying, and she looked over at him, and she hit him in his gut. And he goes, Sheila, she said, you said we weren't going to do that, Jackie. He said, Sheila, we have no choice. It's what the Bible says. I just still sends chills up and down me when I remember that. And I said, Jackie, I said, let's go. I said, baptistry's ready. He said, I can't do that tonight, Rob. He said, we can't do that tonight. And I couldn't understand. I said, Satan doesn't give up. So I spent the next 15 minutes trying to help him understand the urgency of obeying the gospel. I mean, I went to, today's the day of salvation. Almost thou persuadest me. Life is a vapor. What does it profit a man? Wouldn't budge. I finally just threw my hand. I said, Jackie, I said, what are you waiting for? You know you're lost. He said, Rob, it's not that simple. He said, Rob, I hold the bag. I said, the bag? He said, Rob, I'm the treasurer. I got all the money. I got some of it in this house. He said, Rob, I've got to resign. That bothered me for the longest of times. I was in my office later on reading Matthew 7, and I got it. Jesus said, bring ye therefore fruits worthy of repentance. It's not hard for a 15-year-old to repent, but it's an awfully hard thing, and it takes time for a 55-year-old man to repent who's lived a lifetime of religious error. You know what Jackie was saying to me that night? He says, Rob, I need to repent. I've got changes in my life I've got to make. He says, in fact, Rob, you can come to my house every day until I'm baptized, and I did. I packed my family up every single day. We drove over to Jackie and Sheila's house. They're way out in the country. They had a white swing on the front porch, and we just sit there and swing back and forth. Hannah and Jared picked vegetables in the garden. I had more vegetable gardens I knew what to do with, but I went every day. It was a Wednesday night, and I was standing back in the rear of the auditorium. Miss Jill, Deacon's wife, we're just visiting. She looks up. Rob, that is Jackie and Sheila Bird walking into this church building. I said, yes, ma'am. Is that them? Rob, is that the couple you've been studying with? I said, yes, it is. Oh, Rob. Oh, I can't believe it. that's our problem. Brethren, we don't believe. We don't believe this works anymore. Yeah, you can go to India, go to Jamaica, but this doesn't work in America. Maybe with your children, or benevolent, but not in America. People aren't interested in the gospel in this country. They're too busy today. I tell you what, that Wednesday night, when Jackie and Sheila got up during the invitation song and they walked forward, Willette wept. There wasn't a dry eye in that whole church. That night changed that church. From that day forward, we had new marching orders. I used that conversion changed the trajectory of that church. We went from 220 to 240 to 260 to 270 to 290, and we just kept baptizing. And it wasn't just me. We did Bible studies. We went to 300. This is Jackie right after that conversion. He's doing a Wednesday night invitation for the Lord's church. This is her son, Evan. Evan would come and listen to the Bible study. I'm not finished. Man, I'm just getting started. Evan, he would come and he'd listen, and I said, Jackie, we got to do a Bible study with Evan. You know, he works for Dell Computer in Nashville, still lives at home. He drives in every day, over an hour, goes to work, comes back and lives down there in the basement. And this little girl sometimes is with him. Her name's Amy. Amy's the girlfriend. I said, man, Jackie, we got to study with Evan. He said, now, Rob, Evan a little different. I said, okay. I said, we got to study with Evan. He said, now, Rob, it won't work with Evan. I said, well, of course it will, Jackie. I said, we just open the Bible and do it. He said, now, Rob, I just don't. I said, Jackie, I tell you what you need to do. Do a reverse Bible study. He said, what's that? I said, well, just tell Evan, listen, your sister, I need to talk about what your sister, and then your mother and me, what we've done. And he said, Rob, well, Jackie, Rob, get over there and study with Evan. Jackie, of course this will work. Rob, get over. So I listened to Sheila, you know. So I walked over there and said, no, Evan's sitting down. I said, hey, Evan, can I sit? He says, well, sure. You know, we would talk. In fact, I said, Evan, you know, your sister and mom and dad made some pretty big changes in their life, and I thought maybe we could sit down and talk about it. He said, don't want to talk about it. I said, okay, that was a failure. And I said, all right. And so I waited a little bit, and I never give up on people. My whole mission now is to get to Evan. And I kept thinking, what can I do to get, I got it. Evan loves my airplane stories. I use examples, and he'd always say, he said, now, Rob, tell me about that. So I said, okay. And I said, Evan, would you like me to take you up in the plane, and I'll take you wherever you want to go? Me? I said, yeah. Where you take me up? I said, where do you want to go? I've always wanted to fly over Dale Hollow Lake. I heard there's an old city under the lake. You can see it on a I said, you can. I said, hey, I tell you what, meet me down at Lafayette, and we'll go. So he met me down at the airport. We took off. Brother, you can baptize anybody at 5,000 feet. We got out there and we flew around a little bit, and I said, Evan, I said, I tell you what, I said, let's go back to 3 Mike Lafayette and we'll land. And when we got down there, I said, I tell you, Evan, today is your day. I said, I'll take you to eat anywhere you want to go. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's only a Subway. It's all right. He said, why don't we go to Subway? I said, sounds good. We went over to the Subway, you know, and we were eating, and man, I got him right where I want him. I said, Evan, I said, would you give me a few minutes? I'd really like to talk to you about Jesus. He said, don't want to talk about Jesus. And I said, well, man, I'm so frustrated. I don't know what to do. But he stops me. He said, but Rob, when I'm ready, you'll be the first to know. I said, I'll take that. I went a few weeks later, we went to Bible camp, and I'm sitting at Bible camp, and my phone rings. Odd, phone doesn't ring at Bible camp. Normally not a signal. Hello? And hello, Rob? Yes? I've read this book. I think I'm going to hell. Can you do a Bible study with me? I said, who? What in the world? Yes, yeah. Who? I don't know who it is. I said, who gave you this book? Scarlett. This has got to be Amy. This is Scarlett, Evan's sister. I said, what book? Muscle and a Shovel. I said, really? She said, Rob, I've read it. I think I'm going to hell. I need you to do a Bible study. I said, well, man, as soon as I get home, I'm in cloud 9 right now, you know, another Bible study. And she said, Rob, by the way, I just have one condition. I said, you name it. Got to do the study with Evan, too. I said, Amy, Evan doesn't want to do a Bible study. She says, I know, but that's your problem now. And I said, how does this keep happening to me? And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, you know, Sheila loves to cook Sunday supper. and Sunday dinner? She says, yes. And I said, you make sure that Sheila makes Evan's favorite and that Evan knows and that we'll come and we're being invited. We're going to study. Make sure he knows we're going to study with you. He'll stay. You just watch. She says, man, that's a good plan. I said, well, we'll try it. So we came over. She cooked her big spaghetti dinner, and Evan, chocolate chip cookies, my favorite dessert. And we're just sitting there enjoying it together. And Scarlett, his sister, she's driven all the way from Friedharbin just to witness this. She's sitting at the end of the table, and we're done. And I said, well, Nicole, get the booklets for us. Nicole gets the booklets. We pass them out. John 8:32, Evan looks down and says, He got up from that table, and he walked right out of the house. He got in his Mustang. I could hear it turn on. I could hear the crackling of the gravel as he drove down the driveway. And Amy is devastated. She's just in tears. I can't believe, why does he, I don't understand. She's in, and Scarlett, she said, oh, my brother. And then Mama's in the kitchen. I cannot believe my son. And there's Jackie over there in the easy chair reading his newspaper. I told y'all this wouldn't work. And I looked over and I said, guys, I tell you what, here's what we need to do. Amy, we've got to do that Bible study. That's the only thing that matters. She says, I know, Rob. And Nicole and I opened our Bibles, and Amy opened her Bible, and we started that study. We didn't get very far, not even past the first page. And all of a sudden, I heard that Mustang coming back. I heard the gravel giving way, and he pulled into the back of the awning, and he opened the door, and he sat right down at the table. Scarlett is so excited. She says, well, you'll need these Bibles, Evan. He says, I don't want the Bible. And he pushed it back. And I tell you, Amy, he said, now, Evan, we're using these booklets called back. She said, I don't want the booklets. I just want to listen. And he did. And by the end of the study, he's answering the questions. When we were done, they left. I looked over at Scarlett. I said, Scarlett, not in a million years can your family repay you for what you've done. Go home. I said, your brother will not do this in front of you. And I said, in fact, Jackie and Sheila, I think I know what the problem is. I said, Evan wants privacy, and we'll take him to our home, and we did. And we did that second study. He took the Bible and the booklets. He filled out every answer. He is extremely intelligent. He knows. And the study could not have gone better. When the study was over, I looked over at Nicole. I said, Nicole, we have got a problem. And she says, I know. Not every Bible study is going to be like you want it. People have problems, and there's a problem. I got to figure out how I'm going to overcome it, because I never give up, and I know there's no problem God can't overcome. I'm going to finish this story for you later this week. You'll want to come back for this, because there's a lesson that you need to learn. His name's Ed Goolsby. Ed, I was told when I moved to Willette, Rob, don't bother Ed. I said, okay, Rob, whatever you do, just leave Ed. Ed doesn't want you to visit. I said, I won't bother Ed. Well, I've got a dog. Her name is Rue, and Rue chases anything that moves. She is a hunting dog, and I know that if she sees animals, and we're out in the country, it's all over, can't chain this dog up. I bought something. This is an incredible invention. Have y'all heard of it? Invisible fence. You put the collar on them, you run the line. And I'm so proud of myself. I said, man, I have solved the problem. And I'm looking at the booklet. It comes with a booklet. And I read the booklet. Takes 6 weeks to train dog. I have 6 minutes. I turn it on maximum power. She'll learn. And I said, all right, kids, let's go. Well, right about that time, a deer jumps right out of the back of the yard. And Rue sees the deer. It's over. Boom, there she goes. And she crosses the perimeter, lays her out. She's shaking and yelping as loud as a dog can yelp. And the kid, what, Dad, the dog, you're going to kill the dog, Dad. And I said, stop, don't touch the dog, kids, don't touch the dog. And finally it stopped. When it does, Rue shoots across the road right under the house of Ed Goolsby. I said, just what I wanted to do. And I said, kids, come with me, Hannah and Jared. And so surely he'll be nice with Hannah and Jared. So we go over and we knock on the door, and he opens and says, yes, can I help you? I said, yes, sir. My name is Rob. I know who you are. And I said, oh, yes, sir. I said, sir, my dog, did you shoot your dog? And I said, oh, no, sir, I did not shoot my dog, but can I go get my dog? And he said, go get your dog. And so I said, Jared, Hannah, quickly, get the dog. So they're crawling under the house to retrieve the dog, and this is an excellent evangelistic opportunity. And I looked at Ed. I said, you know what? I said, I'm the new preacher. I know who you are, and if I need you, I'll let you know. He slammed the door so hard, I thought it was coming out of the frame. And not a good first impression. Brethren, I never give up on people. I made it my mission. I'm going to get to Ed. And I started praying about Ed, and I'm looking how can I get to Ed? It happened. One day we're going to pass out house to house, heart to heart, and we have a new convert. His name's James and his wife Glenda. James and Ed work at the volunteer fire department. I said, Ed, you knock on Ed's door. Me? I said, well, you're friends. He said, okay. So I went the other direction, and I got a phone call. Probably 30 minutes later. I look, hey, it's James. Hey, James, how's it going? He said, Rob, Ed wants to see you right now. I said, oh, no. And I said, where does he want to see me? He says, at the church building. I said, boy, he's going to give it to me. So I walked over to the church building. There's Ed sitting in a chair. And he's crying. And I said, Ed, what's wrong? He said, Rob, I went to the doctor last week. I said, yes. Doctor says I've got cancer. He said, Rob, would you study the Bible with me? I said, Ed, I'd be glad to do it. We did. He obeyed the gospel. This is Charles, Mary, and you don't see their adult son, Barry. And he's a city manager of Carthage. South of us is a little town right on I-40. And we didn't know anything about Charles, didn't know he was a city manager. And we're passing out house to house, heart to heart. We're just going from door to door. This is one of many methods we're going to teach you. And two of our ladies are, y'all don't have hollers in this part of Texas, I don't think. And but there's a holler, it's a big one. Big house on the top. He raises dogs, ferocious dogs. And they're on chains, and they're barking as loud as they can. Now, Melanie Allen and Betty McCarter are walking across the road, and they see this house. And that's the next house, Betty. Yes. Melanie says, this morning, Rob, when he was training us, said it's still okay to observe the Old Testament Passover. Now is a good time, Betty. We should pass over. And she says, oh, no, this could be the one, Melanie. This probably is the one. She says, oh, Betty. So they begin to walk up the hill. Charles peeps out the window. Mary, the Jehovah's Witnesses are back. We'll get them this time, Mary. They're not getting past. Barry, get ready. They are not getting past me this time. He said, oh, I'll just tell you. He started working himself up, and they knocked on the door, And he says, now, hey, Mary, house to house, heart to heart. We read this publication. Oh, we love this. Hey, the people who send us house to, well, y'all come on in. They said, okay. And they walked into the house. They sat down, and they were talking, and Betty said, well, now, what did Rob tell me to do? That's right. Would you like to know more about the church? And he said, well, we sure would. And she says, oh, no. Oh, and, okay. When would you like to do it? She said, oh, right now. Oh, no. And where would you like to do it? Oh, your house, church, don't matter to us. She says, oh, could you excuse me just for a minute? And she walked outside, and my phone rang. I said, well, honey, it's Betty McCarter. I said, Betty, everything okay? She said, Rob, I've got a hot one here, and I don't know what to do. I said, a hot one? She says, Rob, he's ready right now. And I said, well, she said, they want to study the Bible. I said, well, bring him to the church building. So I get to the church building. There's Charles, there's Mary and Barry, and we sit down, and, man, I've never seen this before, so I grabbed Does It Matter? It's the one study method. And I said, I'm going to go through the whole thing. And, man, they know their books of the Bible. I mean, they know where John is, Matthew is. They get all the answers right. They're enjoying. I mean, you could just see it was like a load off of them to read the Bible and understand the Bible till we got to baptism. Mary got the monobrow, and she pierced her lips, made a fist, and she hit the table so hard, and she pushed, her chair rolled 10 feet. And I looked at Charles. I said, Charles, everything okay? And he says, I don't know. I'm going to find out. And he walked over, and I looked at Nicole. I said, this isn't going to end well. And so we're waiting for Charles to come back, and he takes Mary. They come on back, and I said, Charles, what's wrong? He says, Rob, Mary is angry. I said, I can see. And he says, I said, what's going on? He said, well, she wants to know why she's been going to this church all these years, and they told her she didn't have to be baptized. But we read it in the Bible. He that believes in is baptized. I said, she wants to know why they've lied to her all these years. Mary says, yes, why have they been lying to me? It says it right there in the Bible. I said, Mary, I have no idea. but I know how I can fix it. And we did. We baptized Charles, Mary, and Barry. This is Ronnie Rhodes. He sat in our pews for years. I was sitting with some of the elders during a meeting, and I said, brethren, I said, has anybody ever studied with Ronnie Rhodes? No, don't think so. I said, how long has Ronnie been coming to church here? Oh, 20 years. I said, maybe we can have a Bible study. Oh, Rob, you might scare him off. I said, he'll be no worse. It's amazing what a Bible study does, isn't it? This is Jerry Conley. When I started the School of Evangelism, and I moved down to Jacksonville, the eldership wanted me to prove the concept right there at Jacksonville. So when I'm home, I'm setting all this up. First thing I want to do is I said, give me a list of everybody in this church that's not a Christian that sits in your pews. I got the list. Top of the list was Jerry Conley. I said, Alan Webster. I said, would you take me over to Jerry Conley's house? He said, I will. We got in the car and we drove over to Jerry's. Jerry's got this house. He's in his 70s, and he's got this house that was built in the 1830s, 40s, and it was supposed to be the capital of Alabama. And there was a mining ore. There was an ore mine there, and it was at one time it was a real popular place. Now no one lives there, and the guy's house who owned the mine, Jerry has bought in it, and it went to the family. It's fallen down. Jerry's going to restore it. I walked inside. Jerry's giving me this history lesson, original crown molding, original doorknobs, original floor. I mean, it's incredible. He's excited about this, and I said, man, Jerry, this is so neat. I said, I didn't know anything about Alabama. I said, can I bring my family back and would you tell them this story? He said, oh, I'd be glad to. All I want is a Bible study. No disrespect, but I could really care less about the history of Alabama. I want a Bible study. I come back with my family, and Jerry does the same thing. He takes them through the doorknobs, the original crown molding, the sinks, and I mean, it's exciting. Jerry, is that apple pie I smell? He said, it sure is. Ella Sue's made you one. I said, let's get in there. And we got in there, and she's got apple pie. Now, they call it ice cream. It's not Bluebell. But we serve it up. We serve it up, you know, and we're sitting there. I said, Jerry, I said, oh, by the way, I said, how long you been visiting the Church of Christ? He said, well, since Ella Sue and I got married, you know, I came down here from Illinois. I said, yeah. Do you know anything about the Church of Christ? Not a lot. I said, can I tell you? Well, sure. I just so happen to have these booklets. Nicole, John 8:32. And we passed them out, and we started reading our Bibles. It's amazing what happens when a man learns he's lost. I've never seen anybody drive as fast to a baptistry as Jerry Conley drove that night. I could not keep up. The power of a Bible study. It's incredible what happens when you just study the Scriptures. Sometimes people ask me, they said, Rob, what motivates you? Why are you like this? Why has this become your mission? I don't know if I can answer that so easily. But let me tell you what happened when I was a boy. My dad worked for Delta Airlines. He got transferred to San Antonio, Texas. I was about 4 years old. We moved out to Bulverde. Dad bought a little ranch. Had some horses and a barn. Had a cow, some chickens. I was bored, you know. I said, Mom, I'm bored. She says, go get a friend. So I walked and walked to the next house, and I knocked on the door. Can you play with me? He said, sure. We became best friends. His name is Mel Hutzler. And the older I got, the more I noticed there's something different about Mel. I said, Dad, why does Mel's house, why do they have crosses everywhere? And why do they have statues of Mary everywhere? And why does he go to this thing called Mass? And he's an altar boy. What does all that mean, Dad? Oh, Rob, he's Catholic. I said, well, what does that mean? He explained it. I said, but Dad, I wanted to be a Christian. He said, then teach him, son. And I did. I'm not very good at it. But every now and then I get my Bible out. And I said, Mel, why did the Ethiopian eunuch go down into the water and y'all sprinkle? He said, I don't know, Rob. I said, Mel, why in Matthew 22 does the Bible call no man your father and you call your priest father? He said, I don't know, Rob. I said, Mel, why was the first pope, Peter, married? I don't know, Rob. Where's the Catholic Church in the Bible? I don't know, Rob. We're 18 years old. He walks into my room one day. He's been going to church with me now. He said, Rob, I want to be a Christian. It's one of the greatest days of my life. I said, Mom, Dad, Mel wants to be a Christian. I'm so excited. We're congratulating Mel. We're ready for everything to happen. And Mel says, now, Rob, he says, I need your help. And I said, what do you need? He said, I need you to explain this to my dad. He said, and I said, this is wonderful. Mom, Dad, I'll be back. Going to convert Mel's dad. So this won't take long. So we drive down the road, and we get to Mel's house, and he says, Dad, Rob got to tell you something. So I sat on one side of the table. Mel's dad sat on the other, probably about as far as that man right there. That's what it felt like to me. And I tried to convert him. It didn't go so well. The more I talked, the angrier he got, and I know that Mel's dad has a anger problem. I've seen it. He has a bad temper. Finally, Mel's dad had enough. He hit the table with his fist as hard as he could. He grabbed his wallet out of his hand. He aimed it right at me, threw it like a fastball, barely missed me. And he said, son, you get out of this house. He said, I never want to see you again. He said, you better never talk to my son again. You better never talk to my other sons again. I better never see you again. And Mel picked me up. And he said, Rob, get out. My dad will hurt you. I got out of the house. I said, Mel, I'm sorry. He said, Rob, I am too. He said, Rob, you got to leave. You got to leave right now. I drove home, and I walked into the front door of my house, and I crawled into the arms of my mother, and I just cried. I said, Mom, what happened? I said, my best friend. She said, son, he said, now let me, and they tried to explain to me, they tried to console me. It was 9 o'clock that night, and the doorbell rang. Dad said, that's odd. Son, come with me. And we did. We walked to the door. He opened it. On the other side is Mel Hutzler. He has 2 suitcases in his hand. He said, Mr. Whitacre, my dad told me I could be a Catholic or live at home. If I became a Christian, I'd have to leave. I have no place to live, Mr. Whitacre. My mom grabbed him and said, son, you'll always have a place to live here. That room is yours. Mel moved in. Mel and I worked at Albertsons, and we go to work, and we talk, and I said, Mel, you got to make things right with your dad. He says, I know.